Hi, this is Burr Stewart, and for today's episode of Much Fun with Trains, as promised, we're going to show the 4-unit set of Milwaukee SW1's called Donkeys, which were just released by Walthers. And at the end of the video, we're even going to get in a little narrow gauge action. So let's get started. As you know, if you've watched this channel, we like to run multiple unit diesels. And normally they're high horsepower diesels appropriate to western United States manifest trains, and in some case locals that had grades to climb and so forth. But in the case of the Milwaukee Road, they had some very rusty old branch lines that couldn't take the axle loading of heavy locomotives. And so they equipped some of their very lightweight 600 horsepower SW1 switch engines in multiple unit connectors, and they ran them up to 4 at a time on these branch lines. I know this because I read about it in a book, and I've shown you a couple of photos from that book in the insets here. So, since this is a model railroad operations video series, we're going to operate these 4 engines, and I gave Aidan the assignment of running them light with a caboose from Everett over to Interbay, and then to pick up a cut of cars in Interbay that needed to be moved back to Everett, and so you'll get to see all of this switching take place in the next few minutes. It'll also give me a chance to narrate parts of the layout. So, for example, where we are right here is Mukilteo, which is a small town in between Everett and Edmonds, north of Seattle. And we're going past the Mukilteo team track where you can see a couple boxcars. It's a busy place on the layout with the trucks unloading. And now we're coming along the seawall, and the seawall is on the shore of Puget Sound, which is a large body of salt water near Seattle. And just a few hundred feet out offshore, the depths get down to 800 feet below sea level, which is even farther down than the floor of our basement, if you were to model it in scale. But I digress. So now we're coming around the retaining wall at Golden Gardens Park, past the squealer, which is a circuit that makes a squealing noise, and you'll be hearing that later in the video too. This is the Ballard station, Ballard being a neighborhood in Seattle, and that track heads down to what's called the Fremont branch, and it used to serve the University of Washington with coal for their coal-fired power plant back in the 70s and earlier, and there was even a coal gasification plant back there if you go even farther back in history, and that is now called Gasworks Park, and is a wonderful place to visit if you're ever in Seattle. Now, we've just crossed the Ballard Bridge, and now we're heading into the Interbay Yard. Pay no attention to those big diesels above. That's a staging track for the unit coal train that we sometimes run. So now we're crossing the Emerson Street Bridge and entering Interbay, past the Time Oil facility. You can see the engine terminal on the left there. I'm trying to model the early 1970s, and that's why you have various colors of legacy engines from the Burlington Northern merger, which took place in 1970. Oh, there's that squiggling I like so much. Let's zoom in on that. Of course, these are Milwaukee locomotives, and the Milwaukee Road did have a western extension out to Seattle and Tacoma, which was their main western headquarters. Very good. So we're pulling into the yard track that happens to be open in order to deposit our caboose on the end of the cut of cars, which is to the left there with the two tanks. That's the cut that we're going to pull back to Everett. And so what Aidan is going to do is pull through the whole length of the yard and then shove that caboose on the end of the cut of cars that he's going to be taking. I'm going to explain this operation, but if all you want to do is just watch trains, you don't have to listen to me. You can just turn down the volume and watch the trains. There's a load of rebar in that gondola there just to the right of the locomotives that's coming out of our West Seattle steel mill. A recent addition to the layout that I'm very happy about. And off to the right, you can see the scale house that is used for weighing cars. So a few minutes later, Aidan has returned from the far end of the yard on what's called the zero track. And I'm not going to get into why they had to call it the zero track other than to say that they added it later. So one was already taken and they just used zero in order to add just one track. Sounds like a model railroader, always wanting to just get one more track in there. So now we have what may be the only bang on today's video, which is to drop that caboose. Bang! Sometimes they don't work as well as they should. So now that we've gotten the caboose on the cut of cars, Aidan can run this consist of 4 engines back down to the end of the yard and around to the front. This is called a runaround maneuver. You probably know that. But if you think I'm giving you the runaround, I'm not. I'm just saying that this is a runaround maneuver because he has to get his engines on the other side of the train. Now, Aidan is flipping that switch, giving the brakeman time to run back and get on the consist. So I thought I'd take a second just to show you the car cards and how we use them, since this is an operations video. These are the 5 cars that we're picking up, and you can see their waybills are tinted in a blue and green color, which means that they need to be moved north to Everett. And so the yardmaster previously said it was okay for us to take these cars up there on what I guess you would call as a local run, because they're all destined for points on the layout. And so these are the cars. You can see them here if you want to read where they're going, to the Woodinville branch or to the Weyerhaeuser mill, lumber mill. And that's the C track that they're on, and you can see I put those cards in the box for the C track. Now, once he picks up the cars, he'll be taking those car cards with him, and then when he gets back to Everett, he'll put them in the appropriate track in the Everett yard. And now we have a nice trackside shot of the consist coming down the only empty track in the yard underneath the Dravis Avenue overpass. Isn't that a cool shot? There you can see the engines all latched together. I set them up as a consist in my DCC system, so one command to the lead unit is sent to all 4 units. These are tsunami decoders that I installed in the Walthers SW1's that were just recently released by Walthers with the Milwaukee paint. And now we'll have some more squiggles. I'll zoom in on that again for you. Now he can back onto his cars and we can go. And fortunately, this gives us another bang. Bang! As much as I like to say bang, you know that it's good to couple up very gently as much as you can so you don't damage what's in the cars or damage the cars themselves. So I didn't notice any pause for a brake test or anything like that, but in any event, we are now departing Inner Bay for Everett. That's a standard issue Milwaukee Caboose there. Milwaukee had some wide vision cabooses, but I think it was only 2 of them, so I don't have any of those on my layout. So now we've come over the Ballard Bridge, and we're proceeding past Golden Gardens Park and Carkeek Park. Seaview Avenue is the grade crossing there for the branch line. That branch line is still in service, operated by the Ballard Terminal Railroad.
When you are now an expert.
Exactly.
Glad I could do it.
Might as well use it for something worthwhile, you know?
Good if you know.
And now you can see we're moving along the seawall. A few minutes later, we're crossing the Squid Bridge and heading into Everett's Bayside Yard. And you can hear the squealer performing very nicely. Going past the engine terminal in Bayside with the only working turntable, which we hardly ever use. It's funny, with modeling the 1970s, you don't have steam engines, so you don't really need a turntable. I could tear it up and put an industry in there, but I just don't have the heart to do it. And finally, at the end of our long trip, we've made it back to Everett, Bayside Yard. We're pulling into track 3 in the yard there. And up in the upper deck is the narrow gauge diesel train that we've been showing in some other videos recently. So I thought you'd enjoy seeing that for a minute. And if you want to see more of that, of course, look at the rest of my channel. And there are a lot of videos on the shovel-nose diesels. And there'll be even more in the future because those are some really beautiful engines that we love listening to and watching.
You're just gonna take them? Yeah.
So a few minutes later, we've tied down our consist of 4 SW1's, and we're enjoying the narrow gauge pair of shovel nose diesels from the White Pass and Yukon. We just love listening to this.
It's a 3% grade.
I've seen video of that on
Isn't that a great sound?
well, not YouTube, actually Facebook. Someone posted it on Facebook.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and you'll also check out the other videos, both narrow gauge and standard gauge, on my channel. And for now, as always, this is Burr Stewart, wishing you much fun with trains.
Probably not. In that case.
Well, now you finally know what those funny-looking diesels were doing down in the yard.